you for joining us this evening here on the front porch at Sweet Bee's Honey House. We have had such a beautiful month, and it's so hard to believe that August is nearly over. So we're going to finish this week off in putting all the last 10 days into one video. Now we're going to go over things pretty brief so that we can include all 10 days, and we didn't want a very lengthy video. But don't worry, if there's a particular thing that you're interested in, please comment below and let me know, and we will try to get that video up quicker than the rest. Because with each thing that we've been participating in, we will create a full-length video for each one of those so that you can know all the details about every single thing that we do. Now, we have thoroughly enjoyed participating in the Every Bit Counts Challenge. And thank you again to Jessica from Three Rivers Homestead for coordinating this event. So, as we get ready to start another week, please join us in the kitchen here at Sweet Bee's Honey House, because every little bit counts.
Alright family, this first evening we're going to do some fermentation of corn. We're going to make us a corn relish. This is a wonderful side dish that only takes about 5 or 7 days to ferment. You'll taste it and figure out when it's right for you. You're going to go ahead and cut the kernels off of the ears of the sweet corn. You're going to add some minced garlic. You're also going to chop up an onion and some bell pepper. Now if you want a little more of a kick, you can go ahead and add a spicier pepper. Now we're going to go ahead and mix this in a bowl separately. We're going to go ahead and add the salt, because as you're packing this in, it's going to create its own liquids, and so you need to make sure that that salt solution is appropriate for this amount of corn. We're only going to go 3/4 of the way up into this jar. Then we're going to add our weight in, and we're actually going to fill in some water here, making sure that the water that we're using is a non-chlorinated water, just like the salt that we're using is either a canning salt or a mineral salt. If you're not using these things, it will cause you problems in your fermentation. So we're going to go ahead and add that heavy weight, make sure that we're filling it with that distilled water, and then we're going to put a airlock system on this and allow it to ferment for 5 days. This night we decided to take all the skins that we've been saving in our freezer, and we are going to freeze dry those. Took less than 24 hours to get a good freeze dry on all of these skins, and then we're going to take these and we're going to put them in our grinder. So we took them, broke them up. You'll notice whenever I pull it out of the bag here, it's a bigger chunk. However, we just crushed it a little bit to put it in our food grinder, our spice grinder. We grinded it up into a fine powder, and then we used our 4-jar canning funnel with its colander in it. And we just went ahead, and after grinding it, we would put it in there and just sift it through to a jar that's down below. Anything that we found that was too large, we would just go ahead and add that back to the grinder and grind it back up, and we would continue to sift it through, and then we just put a lid on it and made sure that it was airtight to store on our shelves. Now we use this for any time that we need any tomato paste. We use this and create the paste, and you've got instant tomato paste on hand. Alright family, this evening we're going to be making some strawberry jam. So we took our strawberries out of the freezer and we just allowed them to thaw. This is 2 quarts of strawberries. Ideally they would be crushed, but we can easily hit them with an immersion blender a little later in the process. To this 2 quarts of berries, we're going to add 6 cups of sugar. Now while that's heating up, we're going to go ahead and get our water bath can ready so that our jars are sterilized and hot. While our mixture is coming up to a boil, then we're going to reduce that down and allow it to simmer for 40 minutes. Now we're going to go ahead and ladle up our jars after it has simmered there for 40 minutes. We're going to make sure that in our jars we're allowing it to keep 1/4 of an inch headspace in each one of the jars. And then we're going to go ahead and wipe the jar lid to make sure that we have no residue there, as well as no imperfections in the glass. We want to make sure that we've got a perfect condition for a perfect seal. So we went ahead and debubbled that. We're going to go ahead and remeasure to make sure that we've got that 1/4 of an inch headspace. And then we're going to put on our lid. And once we put the lid on, we're going to grab a ring, and then we're going to put that on and make sure that it's fingertip tight. Now make sure that if you are using a hot item, that you have a hot jar to put it in. You do not want to shock your jars, so that's why we went ahead and heated those jars up first. So now we're going to go ahead and put that in a water bath canner, and we're going to can it for 5 minutes. Once it's done, we're going to make sure that we open that canner away from us so that we don't suffer a steam burn. And then we have got beautiful strawberry jam to put on our counter or our shelves. Alright family, this evening we're going to be fermenting some tomatoes. This is another easy fermentation, and it allows you to be creative. So we're going to take some of these tomatoes and add them to the jar. We're going to go ahead and add some cloves of garlic as well. And it would have been better if I'd have had fresh basil, which would have been lovely for this dish. I had to use dried, but I recommend highly using the fresh basil. So you would add that to the jar, and you're going to be using a 2% salt solution. Make sure that when you are doing this that you're using an appropriate type of salt, either a canning salt or a mineral salt like a pink Himalayan. That would be a good one to use. You definitely do not want to use a table salt. It will cause you problems with your fermentation. So now that we've added our tomatoes, we're going to go ahead and produce our salt brine that we need for this. And we're going to, as I said, it's a 2%. So we're going to take 4 cups of water, and we're going to add 2 tablespoons of salt to that. And then we're going to mix that until it dissolves. Now make sure that whenever you are getting your water that you're using a distilled water and not a chlorinated water. So after we add our salt to that and we mix our brine up, we're going to add that to the jar and make sure that our tomatoes are properly submerged underneath that brine. Then we're going to add a weight on top of that to hold the tomatoes underneath the brine level. And then we're going to add a airlock system, which will allow the gases to release. However, no other oxygen will be able to get back into the jar beyond that airlock system that we've got put in place there. And this is going to make 5 to 7 days. You should have a wonderful tomato. Alright family, this evening we are harvesting some of our Tabasco peppers, and we're adding them to some of the ones that we had in the refrigerator, or in the freezer actually, and we are making sure that we have at least 5 ounces. I had to grab a couple of the Mad Hatters to make this happen, but I definitely wanted to try this recipe, so I went ahead and just substituted those instead of my Tabascos. So we are experimenting this evening with a new recipe using our old formula, but using new ingredients. So instead of just a white vinegar, I'm using a white balsamic vinegar, and I have to tell you, we really enjoyed the sweetness of it. So this worked out really well. We went ahead and put that on the stove and brought it up to a boil. We simmered it for 15 minutes, and now we're using our immersion blender to blend this up. Now we're going to go ahead and put it in our 4 jars canning funnel that has the strainer in it as well, so that we can strain out the juice away from the actual seeds. There's a jar underneath it so it'll catch all of the yummy goodness of our peppers. So now we're going to go ahead and just scrape those back and forth until we separate all of the wonderfulness of those peppers away from the seeds. But don't worry, these seeds will not go to waste. Our chickens will enjoy these seeds. The chickens do not have the ability to taste heat, but it is a good dewormer for them. So we're going to go ahead and throw those seeds to them so that they can enjoy those. And then we're going to go ahead and clean off our spatula real quick so that we can get all that yummy goodness off the back side of that strainer, so that we don't miss a drop. Now this is a very thick consistency at this point, and so we wanted to thin it up a little bit So we went ahead and we added a little more of our balsamic vinegar. So we add a total of 4 tablespoons to get it to the consistency that we enjoyed. So make sure that when you're doing it, if you're doing it, you'll want to make sure that it's to your liking. So we just keep adding the vinegar here until we get it to the right thickness. Now this is one of those types of things, since we are adding vinegar to it, it is an easy water bath can. If you have enough that you're doing, we're just doing, since we're running test batches to see what we want to do with the rest of the Tabasco peppers when they're ready, we're just doing small batches and doing trial tasting right now. So once we figure out which ones we really enjoy, we will be taking those and doing it in a large quantity, and then we'll be canning what we need. So when we get finished with this, we've got a beautiful little half-pint jar that's just halfway full, but it's a great way of us starting the tasting process. And here we just tried it with some chicken, and oh, it was very tasty. All right, family, this evening we are going to be preserving some garlic. We were blessed with an abundance of garlic, so we want to make sure that we utilize it and get it into the freezer and into the freeze dryer as quick as we can. The first step in this process is we mince our garlic up. So we're going to use a cookie sheet covered in parchment paper. We're going to use our cookie scoop, and we're going to scoop out, there's about a tablespoon of minced garlic in that cookie scoop. So we're going to go ahead and we are going to scoop that onto our sheet, pat those down to where we've got little garlic pucks that measure approximately a tablespoon, and then we're going to flash freeze those. And once we pull those out of the freezer, we're able to put them in a reusable freezer bag and keep it in the kitchen, in our kitchen freezer, and that way we have it when any recipe calls for garlic. Another way that we like to preserve our garlic is with the freeze dryer. We go ahead and put the minced garlic on one of the freeze dryer sheets, and when if less than 24 hours, we have this wonderful freeze dried garlic. Then we just take our garlic and we break it up into smaller pieces, and we add it to our food grinder, or our herb grinder, and we are able to just put it in there, and very easily we're able to create garlic powder. And so then we take our garlic powder, we put it in a jar, and then we just put an airtight container on that, and we have garlic powder anytime that we need it. So this is another way that we can easily preserve our garlic. All right, family, this evening we are going to be making some vanilla extract. So we're going to be infusing some vanilla beans in alcohol. Whenever you're making vanilla extract, you need to use a base, either alcoholic or a non-alcoholic. If you're using alcohol, you're going to want to at least use a 70 proof. If you're going the non-alcoholic route, you're going to want a food grade glycerin. You'll use 3 parts of the food grade glycerin to 1 part water. Now we are going to make sure that we have a good double fold vanilla taste. So we are using 2.5 vanilla beans per cup of alcohol. I'm using a vodka at 80 proof. I like using vodka because it allows the vanilla bean flavor to come out. You could complex it with using, say, a rum, which is made from Madagascar vanilla beans, but it also has other things in it, and it makes it, it doesn't bring out the natural vanilla taste in it. There's other complexities in there, so that's why I choose to use a vodka. Now, as I said, we're going to make sure that our vanilla beans are completely submerged, using in this jar 4 cups of alcohol, which meant I used 10 vanilla beans. Now, when I'm using these jars, I try to always use a plastic lid. If I don't have one available, I use a metal one, but I put something in between the metal and the top of the jar. The reason being is because you don't want the possibility of the jar corroding around because of the metal lid. So I always put either a piece of wax paper or parchment paper between it. And that way I ensure that it's not going to cause any issues. This is going to sit on your shelf for about a month before you ever see any kind of real results. Now, the beans that I had left over from the last batch, I went ahead and put those in the freeze dryer, and we ground those up to make a vanilla bean powder. And so now we're going to take that vanilla bean powder, we're going to add it to some sugar to make some vanilla sugar. So we've got 1 cup of sugar there, and you can use anywhere from 2 tablespoons up to 4 tablespoons to make your vanilla sugar. Now, this is great for using in baking things, but it's also great for sweetening other stuff, such as maybe coffee. Now, I'm using a half tablespoon there, so please don't confuse whenever you see me putting so many spoons in there. I really only used 4 tablespoons total to that cup of sugar that I was using. Now I'm jarring it up, and remember, when you pass by it, shake the jar, because the sugar it's going to clump a little bit or stick. So you just need to make sure that you are shaking it from time to time whenever you go past it, or whenever you open the jar up to use it, make sure you stir it really good beforehand. Now, as I said, this is great for use in baked goods. However, I have to say, my favorite use of it is in a cup of coffee. So here we are with our cup of coffee, and it's so, so tasty. Okay, family, so this evening we're going to go ahead and start the process of our ketchup. Now, this is our tomato sauce that we canned last week, so that's what we're using as our base instead of starting from scratch with tomatoes. So we're going to go ahead and add the ingredients. I will include an ingredient list with the exact recipe. This is a tested recipe from the University of Georgia, which is the National Center for Home Food Preservation. We started off with onion powder. We're going to add some sugar, apple cider vinegar, which is the way that we get away with doing this as a water bath canning project. Then we're going to add a little bit of salt, some garlic powder, mustard powder, and cayenne powder. Now, it's very important, if you can at all possible do it, if you're going to make this, use a spice bag, because trust me, it's very, very difficult to take these things back out after you've cooked this down. So it's just very time consuming. So take my advice, use a spice bag. I couldn't find my spice bag, so I just went ahead and added it in there and tried to get it out afterwards, and it was a literal nightmare. So in your spice bag, you're going to be adding your celery seed, your cinnamon sticks, your whole cloves, and your allspice. And so that's trust me, it's very time consuming trying to get it out. So after we go ahead and add all of our spices, we're going to go ahead and give this a good stir, dissolve as much stuff as we possibly can, and then we're going to let this simmer on the stove. Now, I go ahead and bring it up to a boil, and then I reduce the heat and I let it simmer for as long as I want the thickness. So I went ahead and simmered this batch. You know, I live in Florida. It is very humid here. So sometimes it does take a little bit longer for me to get the consistency that I want. And so I was able to simmer this, but it took 4 hours to get it to the consistency that I wanted. And because this is a water bath can, I want to make sure that my jars are thoroughly sterilized, because it's only a 15-minute water bath. So I go ahead and I put my jars in. I'm using the Presto electric canner this evening. So now we're getting our jars ready for that. And now we're going to fill our jars. We're filling it up to 1/8 of an inch headspace. We're going to make sure that we clean our rims of our jars. And after we clean our rim of our jars for 2 reasons. One of which is to actually clean it off. And the second reason we wipe it down is so that we can feel the rim of the jar to make sure that we don't have any imperfections in the glass. So we're going to go ahead and fill those jars up. We're going to go ahead and clean those rims. We're also going to make sure it's not necessarily something that you have to do, but it's good to stay in practice of it. I do use the debubbler and debubble it since it is more of a liquid. It's not necessarily that big of a deal, but as I said, it's great to keep in practice. So I go ahead and do a debubble, double check my headspace, and then I'm going to go ahead and put my lid on it. And then I'm going to put my ring on, and I'm going to make sure that my ring is fingertip tight. And then we're going to go ahead and add this to the water bath canner, making sure that our jars are covered. And then we're going to make sure that this is in there for a 15-minute processing. And as I said, this is a tested recipe from the University of Georgia, and the recipe is also in their cookbook. So we're going to put those in for 15 minutes, and when we pull those out, we've got some beautiful ketchup. Now, the next step is we're going to use some of this ketchup to make barbecue sauce. All right, family, on this evening, we're going to go ahead and take the ketchup that we made last night and start the barbecue sauce for this night. Now, we just put it in the refrigerator. You see me keep coming back with jars, but I am just measuring out so I have exactly the amount of barbecue sauce that I want out of my ketchup that I had reserved. And I went through that whole long process. Remember, I told you, use that spice bag. So, because it really did take a long time to try to get as many of those seeds and things out as possible. So now we're adding our spices. We did start off with adding some water to this. Then we add some brown sugar, apple cider vinegar, some Worcestershire sauce, some honey, some molasses. Then we added a bunch of spices: salt, garlic powder, paprika, chili powder, dry mustard, as well as black pepper. Now, while you're making this, you need to make sure that after you get all of that stirred in, that you are tasting this. You want this barbecue sauce to be to your taste. If it doesn't taste right, if it tastes like it has not enough apple cider vinegar, which is what I had the issue with this night, it just didn't have that kick that I wanted with the apple cider vinegar, I added a little more vinegar. If you need a little more sugar in it, even though it's got tons of sweetener in it, it's got the brown sugar, it's got the honey in it, and the molasses, then if you need a little bit more, add a little bit more. It's to your liking, because what goes in the jar is what's going to come out of the jar. So you need to make sure that you get it to what your preferences are. Now, this is a tested recipe. It was one featured in the Ball canning book, and I thoroughly, when I tried it, I was like, this is a little bit different, and so I tried it, and we really enjoyed it. So this has become our standard that we do each year, that we do our canning of our tomatoes. So now we're mixing all of those spices in. And so what we're going to do next is, after we get a thorough spice mix, then we're going to go ahead and bring this up. We're going to bring it up to a boil, reduce the temperature, and then we are going to simmer this. We're going to simmer it for 20 minutes. So while that's simmering, we're going to go ahead and get our water bath canner ready. We're going to put our jars in so that they can be nice and hot. Remember, hot liquid, hot jars. So we're going to go ahead and get those ready. We're going to start filling those up. We're going to leave a 1/2 inch headspace in our jars. I'm using the 4 jars canning lid, which has that measurement built in. So it's really easy, especially when you're pouring up a liquid like this. And then after we pour up our jar, we're going to go ahead and debubble it. Now, as I said, this is a liquid, so it's not necessary to do this, but I like to stay in the habit of it. And so now we're going to remeasure and make sure that we're at a 1/2 inch headspace. And so then we're going to wipe the rim of our jar. We do this for 2 reasons. One, to make sure it's clean, and also it allows us to fill the rim of the jar and make sure there's no imperfections that would cause us to have a bad seal. So we're going to put our lid on. We're going to put our ring on. We're going to make sure it's fingertip tight, and we're going to add that to our canner. So as I said, this is a 20-minute water bath. So whenever it's ready to come out, make sure you're opening that canner away from you so you don't get steam burned. And there's our beautiful barbecue sauce, and it is tasting. Okay family, this night we're going to go ahead and start working on our chili beans. This is a 2-night process. We go ahead and soak our beans one night and then we process them the next day. We soak our beans from 18 to 24 hours, and we do this because there's a natural occurring compound in beans that's called phytic acid, and I'm sure I'm butchering that, I apologize. And it makes it more difficult for our bodies to digest. So we not only soak our beans, but we also add lemon juice to it. And we do, for every cup of beans that we use 1 tablespoon. And then we're rinsing it the next day, so you don't have that residual flavor of the lemon juice in there. But we make sure that we do this because it is going to help with our body to be able to digest it. So we're going to go ahead, and after we've drained them for at least 18, if not 24 hours, we're going to go ahead and start getting those ready. We're going to soak them, we're going to rinse them, and then we're going to top that boiler off again with water covering them and put them on the stove. And we're going to start the blanching process, and we blanch for 30 minutes. So then after and you'll see here there's a lot of foam on there, we just ease that off. So after everything is said and done, while those are blanching, we're going to go ahead and get our jars ready. And as I said, I've got the recipe at the end. And then we're going to fill our jars up 3/4 of the way up. And then I'm going to add hot water to this. And the reason being, I'm following the National Center for Home Food Preservation. And this is the recommendation, the tested method of canning dried beans. So we're going to make sure that we thoroughly stir that, since we got all of those yummy seasonings in the bottom of that. And then we're going to make sure that we have 1-inch headspace. We're going to wipe those jars, 1 for cleaning and 1 to make sure that we don't have any imperfections in the jar. And then we're going to go ahead and we are going to put our lid on. And then we're going to put our ring, and we're going to make sure that it's fingertip tight. Now I've already got the pressure cooker ready. It's been heating up, and so we got hot jars. We want a hot pressure canner. So we're going to add those hot jars in there, and we're going to, based on your elevation, you're going to look at the National Center for Home Food Preservation to see what the PSI is for your particular area. Now canning beans, this is a 90-minute process for quarts. And so after we went through that whole process, look at those beautiful chili beans. And it is just now starting to get a little cool here in Florida. And so that's going to make for a very good night of chili. Okay family, so this day we were invited to pick Muscadine grapes. Now I'm going to fly through this material, and I apologize because there's just so much. Muscadines are very interesting because they started off as a wild grape. So there are certain things that you do just because of that. Now the first thing we did is pick through it, make sure that we have all the stems out. Then we wash them really good. And then the first step of this process is, because it has such a thick skin, we're going to bust each one of those grapes into our stainless steel bowl or boiler. Then we're going to put it on the stove, and we're going to cook that. We're going to bring that to a boil, and we're going to boil it for 10 minutes, constantly stirring. Now after we are done with boiling it for the 10 minutes, we're going to put it in a strainer, and I failed to video this, and we just let that juice strain out. We put it in a container and put it in the refrigerator overnight. The reason that we do this is because there is a certain acid, and I apologize to my science people, I think it's called tartaric acid, and it will, if we put it in the refrigerator overnight, it crystallizes. And so here we start straining that out, and it's completely harmless. But in your jelly, if you leave it in there, it's going to form a crystal in there, or leave that crystal in there, it's going to taste a little gritty. So just for texture, we make sure that we put that in the refrigerator overnight and strain it. Now we're going to go ahead and put our boiler on the stove and bring our 4 cups of juice up to boil, and then we're going to add our 3 cups of sugar. There's no pectin added to this particular recipe. We're using the natural pectins in the fruit to be able to cause that gel, which means that we're going to bring it up to a specific temperature. So while that's boiling, we're going to go ahead, or simmering, we're going to go ahead and start our water bath canner so that our jars can get up to heat, because this is a very short process. So you notice that I'm pulling off some of the foam, Now normally when we deal with foam, it's a lot lighter in color, but because these are those wild grapes and they have that wonderful flavor to them, when the oxygen hits them, it oxidizes and it causes that brown foam. So we just make sure that we pull it off. It's harmless, but it doesn't look good. Now I mentioned that we're bringing this up to a specific temperature. We're wanting to be 8 degrees above boiling, and that's the only way that this is going to congeal properly. So after we get to the 8 degrees above boiling, and remember your boiling point is different than mine, so make sure you know your elevation so you know exactly what temperature your boiling point is. Now we're going to fill up our jars, and we're going to make sure that we're leaving 1/4 of an inch head space. We're going to go ahead and wipe our jars, and we do this to make sure that we get the residue off, as well as we make sure there's no imperfections. We're going to put our lid on, and we're going to put our ring on fingertip tight, and we're going to put that in our water bath canner. We're going to water bath can this for 5 minutes, and this doesn't produce a lot. It produces a total of 2 pints of jelly, and I do not recommend going big. I recommend staying in small batches. And I put them in various jars. I used 1/2 pint jars as well as 1/4 pint jars. And here, whenever we are finished with that 5-minute water bath can, as we're bringing those up, you can see the beautiful purple texture or purple coloring of that wonderful Muscadine grape jelly. So now we have a quality jelly on our shelves that only has the sugar and the juice. Thank you, family, for spending this week with us. We have thoroughly enjoyed ourselves. So remember, every chance that you get in that kitchen and put away something, because every little bit counts.